Talk about how you can sort of take advantage of location-based effects in interesting ways in your game, besides just not standing in the fire.
There's a number of different things, right? The location things obviously based on synergies, and that is actually a pretty significant opportunity, right? So I'll give you another example. The rogue type can place down a trap, and by itself, it's going to, anyone who runs across it is going to get sort of locked in place by the trap. If in preparation for that, I have a mage buddy with me, right? He can come down and put a rune right on top of that. There's a synergy opportunity available there, so that when the person comes, when the enemy comes across that, right, he'll get silenced. Similarly, a warrior could come in and put down caltrops on top of that. And so if the three of us sort of get together and lay down a bunch of these types of traps, we know we can sort of place a mine, right? That isn't like for the enemy going against that, right? That isn't just get out of this, right? This is have some sense that there's going to be traps in this area, and then deploy my counter tactics, which is a detection system, and then don't run over those traps, right? So it isn't just, okay, there's a fire in here, I'm taking damage, let me get out of the fire, right? Like there's always sort of different ways to try to deny people area, because that's so critical in the PvP and then sort of in the large scale group gameplay.
And there are some soft counters, so to speak, of that too. When Nick talks about laying down an area of fire, or Maria talks about the NPC that did the oil and then that got lit on fire. We have other classes that can lay down healing areas of effects too. So you may not be in the exact dire straits, but there are other ways that you can counter it besides just get out of it. There are things that other players can do to help you survive it a little bit more.
Sure. And while we're playing, we notice that the people that are able to lay down those areas or take advantage of those areas tend to lead the battle. So you'll see a battle rush in, and then you'll see the AoE start going down, and then the battle will start mingling towards those opportunities or countering those opportunities, and that's really exciting to see. We didn't really expect it, but it's really fun.
Like when the first firestorm goes down and all the warriors are like midway through their swing, and they're like, no, I want to go Inferno Cyclone.
And the healer goes, no, I got you.
It's pretty cool when that goes down, right? And then the people in the back feel super cool because they're like, I'm going to direct the battlefield in this way, and the people in the front feel cool because they're an Inferno Cyclone, and that's pretty cool too.
Sure. One of the things that makes you feel not cool often, particularly in a PvP scenario, is getting CC'd to death while your friends die, right? So how do you avoid that scenario when you're still trying to make everybody feel cool by giving them big, awesome stuns and that kind of thing?
Nick kind of touched on this a little bit, where you can use stamina to break out of CC. So we're making sure that a lot of the CC is you can get out of it just by popping the stamina. And again, what Nick was saying, it makes it very strategic, where if I'm in that prior example of charging in with my shield or sword up and I'm burning stamina to cover that gap, I may not be able to break out of a CC later on. So it's very strategic in terms of how you use your stamina, when you use it, and what they keyed off with. Breaking out of any type of crowd control with it is really cool.
Yeah, and to expand on that, right? One of the philosophies of the combat system is definitely, I do not like random passive defense, right? You shouldn't sneak up behind someone and get your really big, devastating backstab all lined up, and then he's looking away or he's eating lunch and not even on his computer, and it's dodge, right? Like that just doesn't feel good for anyone involved, right? If he hit a move that made him dodge, and I know he countered me, then yeah, great, we're playing a game together, right? If it's just randomly happening and there's no way I could have accounted for that, I'm not having fun. I think passive diminishing returns, which is sort of a system a lot of games use, sometimes falls in that same category, where it's like, there would be no way for me to know this guy's been stunned twice already, right? And so I can't counter that. So what we did instead is we just gave everyone in the game the ability to give themselves immunity to CC, right? And in fact, it's not just a breakout of my existing CC when I consume stamina. I'm immune for the next 3 seconds. So it is specifically a counter to getting chain CC'd, right? And it consumes enough stamina so that if I feel like I'm only going to get stunned once, it's probably not worth doing, right? It's definitely balanced. So it's like, okay, I see 2 people here, and I know they're probably about to unload a series of stuns on me, right? So let me just break out of the stun right now, sprint away, get out of that sort of dangerous scenario and find a different one, or use my own counter stuns and get out of there, right? So everyone has access to that as an ability. And if you get caught in a stun lock, it's because you used all your stamina doing something else, and that will never happen right at the start of the fight, and so you sort of never have an opportunity to get out of it.
And that's something
which is the one that is frustrating, right? Like, it's like, okay, I was walking along and it's the 12 seconds of stun and then I die, right? That can never happen. It could happen after I've been fighting for 30 seconds, but I mean, then he probably just played better than me.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, Nick was talking about how everybody can do it. That's actually very important that everybody, every class can do that. It's not just, oh, these guys can break out of it and those guys can't break out of it. Everybody can break out, and that's also very, very important in the PvP situation.
What that also means, because we've given everyone this sort of frequent defense to these crowd control abilities, it means that we're able to make more powerful abilities available to the classes, right? The thing about a CC ability is it's fun to use them and not fun to get hit by them, right? But in this system, what we found is it's perfectly fun to get hit by them, because a lot of times you're kind of like, here comes this big nasty stun, broken, right? And then you go and you hit him with your own, right? And you know that you sort of used a tactic against him and it feels really good, right? And it really allows us to sort of supplement what I was talking about earlier, which is every ability is awesome, right? Because there's a tactic, there's a way to deal with it, and there always is, right? And if you can't deal with it, it's because you've spent that resource elsewhere.
Talk about how you differentiate between weapon types, so how it feels different and how it plays different to play a sword and board versus a two-hander versus being a staff user as a mage or whatever.
Yeah, so your weapon really determines a whole lot of your combat experience, right? And we definitely want everyone to be able to pick a variety of weapons and feel like that affects it, right? So I could, as a rogue, pick up a bow and start shooting it, and my light attack would be a simple bow shot, and my heavy attack would be a sort of a charged up aim shot, right, predictably. I could also pick up a fire staff as a rogue, right, and tap my light attack, and it would be a short little fireball and charge up a fire staff, right? Now, I'm not going to have the sort of correct support abilities that's going to turn me into a full-blown mage, so it's probably not a very smart tactic to do that, but I could, right? Where we do have the interesting differentiation is sort of within weapon types that do match that class, right? So if I'm a warrior, right, and I have a sword and shield, my light attack is swing my sword, and my heavy attack is load up a shield bash, which if I do it fully powered up is going to knock the guy backwards, right? Sort of super satisfying, right? If I use a two-handed weapon, right, two-handed sword, let's say, my light attack is going to be sort of these slicing attacks, and my heavy attack will go for sort of a big, sort of dot style attack. So it really depends on my weapon, right? That determines what my core two light and heavy attacks are going to be.
Nick was saying that a rogue using a staff may not be the most advantageous of a thing for a rogue to do. But I can see situations where if I have high ground and I really want to annoy you, I can just sit there and plink away at you. And then if you're going to try closing the gap, it's like, all right, I'm going to put that away. And then I'm going to run away for a minute, disappear, and then come out and stab you. So the variety of being able to use different types of weapons lends itself a lot to more tactics than you would think.
Yeah, it's always something that comes up, right, is the people who are pure melee classes, and then you're in a ranged standoff in a PvP scenario, and you're sort of like, well, guess I'll wait until this breaks, right? You can always pull out a bow and shoot some people with it, and it's not like you'll be ineffective with that weapon. If it's a good bow, it'll be pretty good. It's just you won't have that whole variety of skills to really turn you into a ranged character, right? That is sort of reserved for the people who specifically selected that class.
Yeah, and with that, we also do want to encourage, if you are, a guy in heavy armor and a two-hander, we don't want to say, you don't get to do anything, sit back and shoot a bow. It's like, we want you to charge in. But if you feel like standing back and pew-pewing, go ahead.
Talk about some of the challenges that you have in maintaining a high player skill cap, despite having fewer buttons to push.
It all really stems from the availability of counters, right, of counter abilities, right? You have this huge amount of depth that's sort of derived from, okay, this mage, has this ability, this AoE ability he puts down, and I know that if I have a warrior buddy with me, he'll synergize and stun the people in the area. But they know that they can either break out of that stun, right, or lay down their own counter synergy ability to try to deal with that. And the depth really comes from the combination of classes and the way you have built your character, right? And we give you a large number of possible spells or abilities that you can equip, right? And if you feel like something's not working, you're like, yeah, my buddy's not helping me out. He's not using synergies enough. I'm just going to take that off and go ahead and go with just the solo move that's going to help me out, because I'm just getting ganked by rogues all day, right? Like, you can do that, right? There's a lot of depth both in the choices I make and how to build my character, and then also in the way those abilities interact with people on the battlefield, right? The fact that you can directly synergize with people as well as sort of just support them in a normal sense, right, means that there's just a huge amount of depth in what abilities I pick and how I use them.
And to bring that into the PvE space, I mean, you can do all these things against monsters as well. So when you are with a group and you're going into a public dungeon or you're going into an instance, your whole group is building finesse. And so the better that your team is at defeating the mechanics that the monsters present to you or that the bosses present to you, the better that your whole group is going to do. So it's not just about beating the area. It's about mastering the skills and mastering the encounters that you're going to be fighting against. So when you're in the overworld, you're going to be encountering all these new mechanics. You'll be encountering blocks, sprint, crouch. You'll be trying to avoid attacks. You'll be trying to avoid charges. But when you go into a group dungeon or a public dungeon, you'll be seeing the same things, only in a large quantity, right? And the monsters know that you're there and they're ready to kill you. They're not just waiting around for somebody to just wander in. As soon as you walk into the room, they are beginning their own strategies against you. So your group must do the same thing that you did in Overworld, only now you're working together, you have synergies together, you must counter the synergies that they're doing, and it's really just a battle as opposed to pull that guy, CC that guy, stun that guy, heal this guy, heal the tank, protect the healer. There's roles, but the roles are not so confining that everybody can't lend a hand in the situation. And you'll come across so many situations that everybody's going to have to adapt very quickly.
So when you say that monsters are starting their own plan and when you enter the room, like what kind of behaviors are players going to see monsters? Like, are they taking up different positions? Are the different groups like trying to, flank you, or like how does that work?
So one example that you might see is when you walk into a room, a guy will set off an alarm. He'll blow a horn, and all the other guys turn. They go, "Oh man, we're getting ambushed. This is terrible." And they'll all start arranging themselves, saying, "All right, you five go in, and we're gonna stand back here. Oh no, they're down. I'm gonna rush in and try and help now." So the monsters are actually actively trying to help each other, and also actively trying to pace themselves as you pace yourselves, because you have to battle the whole room. Not just one pole at a time, the whole room. So it's an endurance fight, and it's also a strategic fight.
So it sounds like there's not really much place for longer term CC in your game in terms of 40, 50 second CC that like it's CC this guy, kill this guy, and the sort of kill orders that we're used to from other MMOs. Is that right? Or do you have a little more of that?
It's a little bit more tactic based. So putting down a 1 minute CC is effectively saying that monster doesn't exist, right? And that's not a strategy that we are going to encourage. We want you to know that monster exists, deal with the things that they're going to do, know their tactics, know what their friends can do to help them. Like Nick was saying, if an ice mage throws down an ice barrier, you could say, he's not really doing anything except for throwing down an ice barrier. I'm not going to worry about him. But if he throws down an ice barrier and the healer runs behind the ice barrier, now you're like, okay, we need to break the barrier, we need to melt the ice wall, and we need to get to that healer. So it's more about knowing the tactics and deploying tactics in the entire environment than it is about just taking guys out of the fight and not being really a factor anymore.
So the thing about long CCs, I think, is it's still a tactic that's available, but it's just that. It's just a tactic versus a requirement, right? I feel like when you get into really hard roles, right, where only the big beefy tank guy can survive hits, right, then you have no option when you come up against a large group but to lock down enough of them, then take them out individually, right, one by one as the tank goes through them, right? You could do that if you really wanted to attempt that tactic, right, but it isn't the only option available to you, right? Because tactics is so important, and we don't want to make sure, or we don't want to enforce a specific group makeup in order to be successful in any given scenario, either in group PvP or in group PvE, right? There's a variety of things you can use to overcome the challenges the monsters present you with, and you've learned a lot of them in the overworld, and then you get to employ them on a larger scale in the dungeons and in the PvP.
Yeah, and to go with kind of what they were saying, it's not inevitable what the monsters are going to do. It's not like you can't stop it. There's some of the things we haven't touched on is like you can stop monsters from doing things, just like you can stop players from doing things. If somebody's in the middle of a large, long cast, then you can actually stop them from doing that and be like, no, don't do that yet. I mean, they may eventually come around to trying to do it again, just like a player would. So being able to stop monsters from doing things is also very important in all those tactics.
So I think people probably want to know about ultimate attacks. Does sound kind of neat.
The word does sound
Pretty
good, doesn't it? It's tied into the finesse system, and so as you sort of build up, your ultimate charge by virtue of fighting well in combat, right? You can see this sort of bar growing, and at which point you can flip and use your ultimate, right? There's a bunch of unique ultimates that are tied to the class specifically, but the rule is I can only ever have one. I must pick the one that I want, right? And they come from they're sort of range from a variety of things, right? I can breathe fire and lay down sort of an area where no one wants to run into. I can summon a really nasty frost Atronach, right? I can bring down a meteor from the sky, right? There's lots of really cool things I can do, right? And none of them have any cooldown or any restrictions or magicka costs associated with them, right? It's just this meter that I use to build up, and so you sort of it sort of creates two scenarios, but the main one is like, I just finished that fight and my ultimate is up. Let's go to the next fight, or especially in a PvP scenario, right, where like a couple of people have sort of like gotten that ready, right, and then they drop their ultimates, but the other people are smart and they have theirs ready and they drop theirs, and then sort of it creates a pretty cool scenario, right? When to unleash that is actually pretty, just another tactical decision that comes up.
Sure. How do you get that from feeling unfair in PvP when you just get ulted on by like three guys, right? Is it just your fault? Like, don't get ulted on? Is that like?
No, I don't think it's don't get ulted on, but I do think it's always a careful balance, making sure that no abilities we have are I win buttons right away. I mean, you could take a look at the same situation of just saying I got nailed by 5 mages all doing fireball at the same time. I mean, there comes to a certain point where you go, there's really nothing you can protect against those types of situations. But in the situations where things are building up to a certain level of where this ultimate's going to get unleashed, having what Nick was talking about, one side having theirs ready, another side having theirs ready, and then you can kind of play off each other, and then by doing that, you're building ultimate up again. So it does play back and forth and back and forth. But there are definitely situations where we will have to be very careful to make sure we don't make you're dead, I win, let's go home and retire.
I mean, this absolutely goes into how we design the ultimates, right? So for a couple of reasons, we absolutely don't have any ultimates that are, you just hit this button and do a big chunk of damage, right? I think the main one is because that's a rotation, right? And we are anti-rotation. We are pro-tactics, right? You should do things because the enemy did something or you're trying to set them up for a scenario, not because it's the thing I hit when this thing's not on cooldown or I hit every time it comes up, right? And anytime you get just like, this is a big damage move, that's where it goes, right? The other thing is specifically what you were talking about, which is, all right, all three of us all get together and then we all use our ultimate on one guy and he had no chance of winning. Instead, the ultimates tend to be these duration things like I will lay down an area of fire or I will summon an Atronach that will then follow me around for a little while, right? So it doesn't just win you the fight, it just gives you a significant advantage over the next period. And there's plenty of ways for people to cope with that, right? If you see a Frost Atronach, like, you can just sprint away, right? And it'll despawn, right? Like, it'll fall apart eventually, right? We don't make the hey, everyone's ultimate is just a big single target nuke that you can do from stealth at range, right? Like that. Yeah. Like it isn't a kill button, right? Because that wouldn't be fun for anyone.
And like it'd be fun for me.
It'd be fun for the killer.
And not all ultimates are damage based. Bring up something which is going to kill somebody. There can be ultimates which are aiding ultimates.
Yeah,
so it's not like you're dead. It's hey, you use your ultimate. I'm going to use an ultimate to counter that one. So it goes back to that whole we need to make sure all the abilities we're making are super cool, but also not I win buttons.
It definitely makes us pretty happy, right? Instead of, hey, we're both doing this same quest together. Let's do it. Like, and what that means is I'll use my rotation on that same monster that you use your rotation on, and he'll die twice as fast. Instead, it's no, I'll do a different set of things depending on what your class is and what my class is than I'm used to doing, right? And that was initiated outside of group, right? Like the first time I did it, it was just an opportunity that I took advantage of, and then we're like, well, hey, let's do this more. Let's group. Let's do the quest together, and it's much more organic. And because we're sort of very generous with giving you sort of experience and rewards for grouping, it is just a system that sort of allows that to happen even more.